Welcome to Rauta's Indie 5. This time I have once again 5 different releases, a little bit older from 2019-2020 mostly, and what is in question here is black metal and death metal of various styles, of various qualities. I guess I could say 2 bad ones, 1 rather good one, and something in between. Once again, going through in alphabetical order, so there's no other reason to go with this direction and these ways. First we'll start with the band called Stronghold. Previously unknown band to me, but this was a rather pleasant release and surprise because in fact it reminds me of 2 different bands of very different styles. And here the album in question is Spectres of Bloodshed. And this one is black metal of raw sorts combined into more melodic heavy metal. Sounds rather odd, I must admit, but the thing here is this is actually pretty good. The earlier black metal parts or black metal elements with this one reminds me of earlier Graveland. This is kind of a not so strong guitar sound, which is then combined with these more heavy metal like riffs, and it's an interesting thing. Like I said, lots of Graveland with this one, especially the Celtic Winter, Following the Voice of Blood, that era of 1990s Graveland, with not too strong raspy vocals, but quite okay. But the atmosphere is pretty okay. And then this one is combined with melodies which actually remind me of new wave of British heavy metal. One could even go as far as to say there's kind of Iron Maiden-like feeling. Well, that might be too much, but if you give this a couple of goes and you really pay attention to these riffs, I mean, they are kind of catchy. That combined with rawer end of black metal sounds like it's not gonna work. But let me tell you, there are delicacies around the world which are sounding odd and they sing wonderful. And this is the music equivalent to that. So raw black metal combined with melodic heavy metal sounds a little bit weird, and to be honest, could benefit of a stronger sound. But overall, if you like old Graveland like I do, there is no reason, absolutely no reason why not give this one a go. So check it out. Interesting release nonetheless, and looking forward to hear it from these guys again. And then we go to Portugal with very different kind of raw end of black metal. This one is Concilium. This one doesn't really boast with lyrics and whatsoever, just a couple of photos and very messy logo. The thing here is Portugal has been quite a different thing when it comes to black metal past few years, and it's mostly known for very messy production, combining with this raw end of black metal. Not necessarily so primitive when it comes to individual riffs and all, but more like having very lo-fi production combined with kind of a dissonant riffs and chaotic soundscapes, and trying to create a new ways or new scene for raw end of black metal. Lots of bands which sound absolutely like shit. Well, maybe that's too harsh thing to say, but let's put it this way. A lot of those seem as if they're concealing their lack of good riffs and compositions with their very messy, dissonant, chaotic soundscapes and production, which is like, okay, we're gonna do something really raw, and we can hide it all, like as if you can't really figure out what's the riff like, or the melodies like, or the vocals and whatever, because the soundscape is so messy. Now, there's one thing to do Iliorn and Dogthrone kind of a raw black metal, where you have really this sinister feeling, raw black metal, but it still is kind of making sense with the production. And then there's these Portuguese bands which just don't get it. To be honest, this one is quite bad. It's almost like shitty album, because first of all, there are like a couple of ideas where like, okay, I get where this band is going to, but it sounds weak, it doesn't sound powerful, it doesn't sound evil, it doesn't sound sinister, it doesn't sound dark. It's actually rather boring. Like, hey, let's go so evil to this soundscape, and the result is like, man, this is more annoying than anything. Like, wow. I mean, there are raw bands and then there are raw bands. Next one it goes Hungary, and this is also another kind of a rawish end of black metal. Band name is Gyötrelem with Üresség. Yeah, Hungary is kind of a hard cookie to crack. And then put an insect on the top of your album cover and you have it all. Now, here are the lyrics. This is in fact not a real band, but a solo project, and one can imagine after many years and few full albums, this would be a project that really has something special going on, at least in terms of quality. Now, unfortunately, this is quite the opposite. Now, in my opinion, this is more like a band or a project that doesn't really get like where they are going, where they're heading, what they're trying to do. Some more potential riffs, but also quite a lot of shit with this, to be honest. It's more like you have, for every rather decent idea of a melody or riff or thing that could actually grow into something worthwhile, there's like 5 bad ones. It's as if you have this, basket of apples and you're blindly trying to figure out which one is not the rotten one. So you know what it sounds like. The production is quite weak for the kind of music here. The vocals are okay, but everything seems much like a mess. Luckily it's only some 33 minutes, because even with one go I was like, man, do I really have to go this multiple times? And yes, I did, and it only managed to annoy me a little bit more. If it only was some 10 minutes of a demo with the best parts, it would be rather decent. But like I said, too many horrible parts and shitty parts that it doesn't really even go for a mediocre one. To be honest, I don't know which one is actually worse, this or the Concilium one. Both are something that I urge you to skip, but in case you want to figure out, you will find the links provided. Then we have this international project called Morbid, Stench, Doom and Putrefaction. And I guess you can pretty much guess this is death metal. It's not the fast or brutal type, but the rather kind of a slow mid-tempo, almost going to levels of doom death that, to be honest, I wouldn't go as far as to call it that. So let's just call it old school death metal. Much like what bands were doing in very early 90s, like first album in 1991 kind of stuff. And to be honest, it seems like these guys are stuck in the idea how those mediocre albums back in the days were doing, because this is in fact that. Nothing bad, but nothing standing out of ordinary. So if you think about albums, say early Sentenced or early Edge of Sanity, things like that, this is pretty much what you're gonna get. If you really like that old school death metal, I mean, if you're really a fan of those bands, this could be really the thing for you. But much like those bands mentioned, this is not the best of what is out there. I mean, there are lots of bands that after a couple of albums kind of figured out what to do and made it so much better. This is kind of a typical first album. It's like lacking the good ideas, the good riffs, the good execution. Even the vocals are more like, hey, we're just practicing rolling, which is kind of interesting considering that these guys are not newbies to the genre. They have multiple projects, so this seems more like a, hey, we're gonna do our old school death metal project, and it sounds like, yeah, you just started something that was already invented more than 30 years ago, and you really don't have to do those same mistakes. Then again, there are lots of people who really liked what was going on with the very first wave of death metal, even late 80s, late 90s. But let me put it this way. While Cannibal Corpse and Death and D-Side and Balthazar were doing good albums from the very beginning, there are lots of bands that were not that. Morbid, Stench is the latter type. Not bad, but kind of a mediocre and forgettable in its own territory. Last but not least, let's go to UK with this black metal MCD by Polish guys. The Devil's Sermon with the, I don't know how I should be pronouncing this, but you can probably figure it. Rydwany ognia. Rydwany ognia. Sounds almost like I'm talking backwards. Features 4 songs about 19 minutes and starts off with a rearranged Bathory cover. To be honest, I didn't at least originally even figure out it is Bathory. But then I was reading about it and I was like, okay, this is Chariots of Fire just made into something different. Other than that, these features melodic black metal, rather slow tempo ways. One could even go as far as to say this is kind of a black doom. I mean, the tempo is really slow, not even mid-tempo at some parts, which then again is kind of an interesting choice given that there's so many melodic black metal bands going full speed ahead, you know, bands like Dark Funeral and the like. So this is a kind of opposite, yet at the same time being very melodic. This is also a bit more melancholic rather than dark and sinister, which then again is also interesting. This could be really a really nice one, but it actually lacks the magical parts. It's almost like you basically have it, but in practice you really don't. So theoretically speaking, this could be a really nice release, but it, in my opinion, has too much filler material to be actually really good. So kind of easy to listen, kind of easy to enjoy for some bits, but then it's also very forgettable. Some melancholic moments, decent production, and I could say band in the making. Now after this one, the band has actually released a new album. I don't know how much better that could be, but there's something interesting in this one. But this one is one of those no cigar ones so far. But melodic black metal by Polish guys living in UK, that's pretty much what you need to know about the Devil's Sermon. So once again, if I had to pick only one of these releases, I would go back to the review one and say Stronghold is the winner of this pile, being the actual only really decent one, and the rest, well, not so much. So 2 bad ones, 2 in-betweeners, and 1 rather good one. That's how it goes. Once again, don't take my word for it. Figure out for yourself which one you actually like. Links are provided in the description box for you to find more information and sound samples. Not all bands are available on Bandcamp or streaming services, but if you really like a band, go for a physical product or at least try using YouTube search and other functions to figure out where to listen to these babies. This is Rauta. Take care and enjoy some Indie 5. Take care.